to go through fairly quickly. So the first few slides are fairly obvious. What I'm trying to say here is that working on gender involves working with socio-cultural norms and values and practices. So therefore, any gender work is complex. It has to engage with complexity. It has to continually address power relations, particularly gendered power relations, and work from within culture and context. So gender work, I'm arguing, is about social transformation. So the question is, how do we measure social transformation? Most measuring is done with linear causal logics, from cause to effects, results-based management. All of the evidential claims and demands and frameworks that we've been provided with are linear, and that causes real problems. I say their social transformation emerges from within groups and communities. It's not something you can necessarily predict from the start of what you do. It doesn't get covered in log frames. Pathways to change may differ from one context to another, and there's always the unpredictable and the unexpected which characterise social transformation. If you don't know this framework, I'm not going to spend time looking at it because we don't have that time. But there are 4 quadrants there. So it's only in the simple quadrant that you get anything like a linear logic, a cause-effect logic. And there's almost no gender work in that. The gender work falls into all the other quadrants. So you can come back, it's a lovely framework if you don't know it. So the questions for understanding, the epistemological questions that Mike referred to, that I'm going to deal with, is how do you document, monitor and learn from practices of social transformation? And then what constitutes evidence that social transformation is occurring? And I want to begin by talking about the perspective of these questions. These questions are often framed from the point of view of an external agent. So, for example, a donor or an external evaluator. How can we, the external evaluator or the donor, determine that program's effective? What do we consider would constitute evidence for change out there? Now, in our practice, we've sought to frame the questions from the inside out, starting with the perspectives of the communities seeking to change, then the perspectives of those working with them to help bring about this change, and then the perspectives of those managing, supporting, funding, scaling up, evaluating, etc., such initiatives for social change. So, therefore, this is our practice. We try to understand social transformation from the inside out. We start with the community perspective, go on to what I call the facilitator, which may be, in our case, a facilitation team, it may be an NGO, it may be anywhere there, and then the external perspective is there. So I'm going to present a case study. It's work we've been doing in community conversations in Papua New Guinea, and I'm not going to describe community conversations except enough to let you know what's involved. It is a social transformation methodology. It works with communities to assist them to change their sociocultural norms, values and practices. And the assumption is that this makes individual attitudinal and behaviour change more possible and sustainable. We can talk about that at great length later. The principles of the CC approach is that if you're going to go and work with communities in order to work through their gender beliefs and values and practices, you have to start with yourself. You have to really examine your own gendered behaviour and assumptions. Then you have to talk with your families about why you are going to work on gender or gender and HIV or any of those drivers of social transformation. And only then, after you've done that, do you go into the community. So our facilitation teams do not just go into a community to work with them. Community conversations create safe spaces where everybody can talk, and we negotiate those safe spaces often over periods of weeks or months before we begin our work, because in those safe spaces, anybody who wants to talk must be able to speak their truth without the fear of revenge or compensation or payback. The conversations are structured, they're team-based, we model the gender and our other principles, and they're sustained over time. They're facilitative, not directive, start where people want to start and go where they want to go. They work directly with power, and they work with the energies and the interests of the community, which is what is involved in starting from where the community are. So here are some community conversations in Papua New Guinea. just to give you a sense of what it might look like. This one's in Kamene's area in Simbu. So this is in Gulf Province in the men's longhouse. This is in Jiwaka Province, sitting in the village. And this is how we start from the concerns of the community. First time that woman's ever spoken in the community, and she's never been in the longhouse before. This man is known within the community for being a thief and a drunkard and a sexual abuser. Facilitating a community conversation, we sit with the community, we talk with them. It is a conversation, it's not a directive process. This is building the capacity of our teams to facilitate. These are our facilitation teams going to a community conversation, to hold a community conversation. These are our area coordinators, the people that work with our teams to build their capacity. So our structure is, we have the communities, we have teams that work directly in those communities, in a number of communities, and then we have our area coordinators that coordinate those teams, a core management team, if you like, there. So this is just to remind you, because I'm going to talk about the documentation, monitoring and learning processes within this work, and they start from the community in. So working with the community, what we call working from the centre, this is the process. These are our 3 levels of documenting, monitoring and learning that reflect the last slide there. So first of all, the community itself monitoring change that's occurring within it. Secondly, our community conversation facilitation teams documenting, monitoring and learning from their work. And thirdly, the management team, which includes our area coordinators and partners. We sometimes have area coordinators, sometimes have an NGO as a partner. And this is done through a private sector organisation called the PNG Sustainable Development Programme. The money comes from it. So we have a board rather than a donor that oversights and demands to prove that demands the evidence that what we're doing is worth the money they're giving to us to spend on it. So just to give you some examples of communities themselves monitoring their change. So when a community takes a decision, we often ask the community how are they going to, so that they might make a decision, for example, no markets in the morning because everybody's gravitating to the markets and playing card gambling and drinking, and the women aren't getting to the fields, etc., and the men are getting violent, or they might take another decision. So we can record the decision, but we also help them, we ask the question to them, well, how will you know, or how will we know that we have changed? So they then have to think about how they will know and whose job it will be to report back at future conversations about what change is occurring. We've also come up with a methodology, as you all know, in villages. People are away, they're working in towns or wherever, they come back for feasts, they come back for weddings, they come back for Christmas and holidays. So they're the ones that come in and out of the village. So they have a sort of insider-outsider perspective. So we've developed this methodology to ask those returning to the village about the changes that they're noticing in the village or settlement. And then we've developed some simple community self-assessment tools. For example, where along the line is the community? And you get the community to sit and discuss where along the line they think they are, on whatever it is that you want them to be self-aware. What Dame Carol called this morning the process of critical self-awareness, which is absolutely critical at the individual level, but also at the community level, and a skill that is really important to strengthen if communities are to be the architects of their own social transformation.